Joanna?
Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to the Activist panel. We're so excited to bring you here today for our first ever panel filled with amazing panelists with even more amazing stories to share with all of us today. Thank you so much for coming, and we promise we'll be worth your while.
We have invited 7 organizations and activists to come speak about their individuals' journeys with advocacy, taking action within their communities, and how you can get involved and start creating change in your own ways. One of these ways is through voting, but we'll get to that later.
But first, let's do some introductions to our panelists. My name is Joanna. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm from Los Angeles. I'm part of the Outreach and Event Committee of Future Voters of Los Angeles, and I do not have a favorite sandwich because I don't eat meat.
My name is Bianca Cherry. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm from Los Angeles. I'm head of the Outreach Committee for Future Voters LA, and my favorite sandwich is a crazy sandwich.
We are part of Future Voters LA, a youth-led initiative focused on informing and educating youth about their vote and its importance. Our mission is to raise awareness of our power as young voters and inspire them to take to the polls in order to foster the change they want to see in our nation.
We're super excited to introduce our panelists for today, but first and foremost, we'd like to acknowledge the disgusting verdict that was made today in the case of Breonna Taylor. One of our panelists today, Devin, is going to give us more details on the situation and lead us in a minute of silence to respect her memory.
This afternoon around 2 p.m., it was announced that the grand jury in the Breonna Taylor case made the decision to indict one of the 3 officers involved. One of the officers was indicted for 3 counts of wanton engagement for the stray bullets that went into other apartments. First-degree wanton endangerment is a Class D felony. Some Class D felonies you might be familiar with include shoplifting and stealing mail. Most offenders do not serve time, but when they do, it's only up to 5 years. No officers were indicted in the charges directly related to her murder. After months of protesting and the use of her story in the New York Times documentary and plastered all over social media, this news is disappointing and heartbreaking for all that so many of us has done these past few months to bring her justice. We would like to take a moment of silence to recognize the mourning of her family and a large portion of the Black community at this time. This is injustice, and we stand with everyone who is fighting against this in their own ways. The moment of silence will now begin and last for 45 seconds. Okay.
Thank you so much, Devin. This just gives us all the more reasons to raise our voices against injustice and fight for those lives, such as Breonna Taylor. Now let's hear a little bit about our panelists who will be the leaders of those future movements. Take it away, Joanne and Joey.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Joanne Gosal. My pronouns are she and her. And I'm currently in Long Island, New York, and I'm one of the co-founders for JJ Eco Friends. And my favorite sandwich, I have to say, is ham and cheese.
And hi everyone, my name is Joey Liu, and I also use the pronouns she and her. I'm also from Long Island, New York, and I am the CEO and co-founder of JJ Eco Friends. And I have to say that my favorite sandwich is anything that has avocados in it. I'm just obsessed.
All right, hi guys, my name is Grayson and my pronouns are he, him. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, and I co-founded Beyond the Ballot with Devin, and my favorite sandwich is probably a burger.
Hi guys, I'm Devin. My pronouns are she, her. I'm also one of the co-founders of Beyond the Ballot, and my favorite sandwich is probably a Cuban sandwich.
Hi guys, I'm Niad. My pronouns are she, they. I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I'm the executive director of Earth Guardians LA Valley. And I think obviously my favorite sandwich has to be an ice cream sandwich.
My name is Frances. I go by she, her. I'm from Brooklyn. I am one of the founders of Stand New York, and one of my favorite sandwich has to be chopped cheese.
My name is Anesa. I am an overseer for Stand New York. My pronouns are she, her, and my favorite sandwich is possibly a bacon, egg, and cheese with jalapenos.
Hey everyone, I'm Emma. My pronouns are she, her. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I'm one of the chapter directors for Sunrise LA Youth. And my favorite sandwich, I would have to say just anything on a bagel, for sure.
Hi guys, my name is Simran and I'm the founder and president of the Ballot project. I'm from DC, but I currently live in Toronto, and my favorite sandwich is probably just a plain and simple grilled cheese sandwich.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Stella Rose. I am one of the founders of Sam's Chat. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently in Los Angeles, California. And you know what? I'm gonna have to piggyback about what our previous speaker just said. I'm definitely a grilled cheese girl too.
Amazing. Thank you for those introductions, and now let's dive deeper and hear more about your story with activism. Joanne and Joey, would you care to start us off by talking a little bit about JJ Eco Friends?
Yeah, of course. So, hi guys, my name's Joanne, in case you forgot already. And so to start off, I just want to give you guys some background about myself. I was originally born in Houston, Texas. I lived there for like 10 years, and it was really where I consider the bulk of my childhood to have been. And then one day, towards the end of my 5th grade year, my parents told me that we were going to be moving to the Bay Area in California. And I was definitely not very excited to be leaving my friends and leaving that comfort zone I was always so used to. After another big move 3 years later, I ended up where I currently am in Long Island, New York, all the way across the country. And when I first arrived here after setting foot at the LaGuardia airport, I promised myself that I did not want to relive those first 2 weeks of being the new kid where I didn't really know anybody and mostly kept to myself. Because trust me, it's not fun. And this time I really wanted to take the initiative to talk to people and make friends wherever I could. And honestly, nobody here knew me anyways. I could basically just pretend that I'm the most outgoing, extroverted person ever, even though I wasn't, at least not at the time. And for that reason, in my freshman year, I had a major change in my personality. I'd gone from the quiet, submissive girl in the friend group who was always agreeable, just kind of neutral and everything, to the loud, energetic one that's really outspoken. And honestly, I think it was just my true personality surfacing after having been suppressed all these years beforehand due to, I don't know, fear of judgment, wanting to fit in, not having conflict with people. But whatever the reason, I've obviously gotten over it. Cue the hair flip. But the moral of the story is that because of this change in personality, I was able to form my own opinions on different topics and really go out of my way to speak my thoughts and embrace my voice. Eventually, this led to the creation of JJ Eco Friends, which I co-founded this April together with Joey. And that being said, I'll pass the baton over to her.
Thanks, Joanne. So, hi everyone, my name is Joey, and my life story definitely isn't as interesting as Joanne's is. I basically lived in New York my whole life, and I moved around a little bit, but it wasn't anything too drastic. And so I don't think I get as much experience or the perspective that Joanne gets. And so I think that does affect, my thoughts and also my opinions. And in terms of activism, I have to admit that I'm not a particularly outspoken person usually. I definitely would rather just sit back and listen to what everyone else has to say first, and then slowly formulate my thoughts in my own time. I'm a really big supporter of seeing things from a different perspective and thinking from the shoes of someone else. And I actually don't believe that like issues are like a clear cut black and white. In my opinion, most things in life are somewhere in the gray area in between. So I definitely do spend a lot of time talking to other people and a variety of different stances to see and understand where they're coming from. And so there are periods of time where I don't have an opinion on something, or it's not a super strong opinion just because I feel like I don't understand enough. And that is why I think JJ Eco-Friends, which is the organization that Joanne and I have co-founded, is such an amazing way to inform others about these issues. We provide unbiased information in a cute and unique way by presenting it through character collections that are also addressing global problems. And we hope to educate our audience so that they can form their own opinions on these issues and then take action. And that actually brings us to the subject of voting. Voting is such an important way of having your voice heard. It is your way of showing that you care and that you support people who are fighting for change. And I can bet all $5 in my bank account right now that really, if we all like come together and really stand for what we believe in, then we can make the world a safer and better place for everyone. So I think that's it for my spiel. Thank you all for listening, and back to you, Bianca.
Thank you so much, Joey and Joanne. Keep up the amazing work. Now, let's hear from Grayson and Devin from Beyond the Ballot.
Hi guys, my name is Grayson.
And I'm Devin. We are the co-founders of Beyond the Ballot. I've always considered myself pretty active in politics, but it was only this summer that I realized how much I don't know about our government, especially on the local and state levels. This summer, I spent a lot of time contacting my local representatives about the NYPD police budget. Before this, I didn't realize how easy it was for my voice to be heard as a young constituent. Quite frankly, I was shocked when my representatives responded to my emails.
Similarly to Devin, I did not pay much attention to many of my local representatives. And if we're being honest, I could not name any of my lower level state and local representatives. After COVID broke out in March, I quickly realized how critical the responses of our state and local politicians were when our federal government left the states to fend them for themselves. Whether it's COVID or police budgets, 2020 has been a learning year for both of us, which is part of why we started Beyond the Ballot.
When Grayson and I realized that we weren't the only ones that had a lacking understanding of how our government functions, we knew we had to do something about it. Beyond the Ballot seeks to empower Gen Z to vote through civic education. Voting should not be a guessing game, and we want everyone to walk into their polling place this November prepared to make a conscious decision about who they want their representatives to be.
Youth voter turnout is such a big issue, and we think that coming at it at the most foundational level, which is civic education, can make a big impact. We need to understand our government if we want to change our futures for the better.
Although the work is hard, it has been really rewarding, and we've been lucky enough to have a great team that is expanding every day that supports us. We're so excited to be here today, and it's great to be around other youth activists. And we just want to give a quick thank you to future voters of LA for organizing this great panel.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Now we're giving the spotlight to Sydney from Earth Guardians LA Valley.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sid Niad, and I'm the executive director at Earth Guardians LA Valley. And my passion for the environment began with David Attenborough documentaries I watched as a kid. And in those documentaries, he would always talk about all the things that were threatening all the beautiful places and creatures I had learned about. And I was terrified of growing up in a world where those didn't exist, and I wanted to do something about it. One problem, I had no idea how to be an activist. This year that changed. When the Black Lives Matter protests started, I remembered sitting in bed and watching it on the news and thinking, why am I not out there with them? The next day, I went to Santa Monica to protest, and I saw people my age stepping up with megaphones, leading massive marches. And I realized it's that simple. I just go out and use my voice. I took what I learned from the protest to create Earth Guardians LA Valley so that other kids who want to do something to protect their home have a place to go to use their voice. Since then, Earth Guardians LA Valley has been working nonstop to combat climate change within our community. We want to reduce the harmful effects of climate change, seeing as some have already, we're already seeing the effects of it across the country. By starting to advocate for environmental justice in our own community, we're starting a ripple effect of healing. It also means we get to help people in our own community and observe the impacts for ourselves. Climate change is a greater threat to us now than it has ever been before, especially as government protection measures continue to dwindle. We will feel the effects of climate change more than any other generation, so it is our responsibility to do what we can to prevent it. Becoming an activist is easier than it seems, because us minors don't have the luxury of voting. Small acts like researching the brands you buy from takes power away from those who are harming the environment and puts it right back in your hands. But for those who can vote, it is extremely important that you do so, because your vote has the ability to ensure that our future is protected. And I'm so grateful to future voters for giving me the platform to spread that message, because people need to be aware that their voice and their vote matters. Thank you.
Great, that was amazing. Now let's pass it to Stan New York. Anesa and Francis, take it away.
Hi guys. So I think my activism story is pretty basic. I got into activism my freshman year of high school. My entire life, I really did live in like a predominantly South Asian community, more specifically like a Bengali area. So I wasn't really familiar with any issues outside of the ones my own community faced. And honestly, I wasn't really aware that there were issues outside my community. So going into high school introduced me to so many types of people with different backgrounds. My high school consists of almost 6,000 students from different areas in New York. So it was just meeting a lot of people. I joined my high school debate team with the hopes of continuing debating middle school topics that I was debating before, like should cafeterias serve healthy food or should schools be gender separated? But high school debate was entirely different. We're talking about like capitalism, racism, Islamophobia, things like that, and all things that I just didn't realize were real things that affected me or even like other marginalized groups. And after gaining this understanding of all the major issues, I kind of became more passionate in wanting to educate myself and others.
Yeah, so similar to Anesa, I initially started activism for very selfish reasons, because I thought doing more activism and being more involved specifically within the Asian American community would make me feel more comfortable and more empowered in my own racial identity, and it did kind of. But then the whole purpose of Stand was that it created this more BIPOC community that strayed away from Asian American community, just Asian American activism. So I started out with interning for the only Asian American woman in the New York State Assembly. So and I organized and attended a bunch of Asian American conferences and volunteered for nonprofits and like ran an Asian American identity curriculum. But I grew to realize that our activism is very segregated. We have a lot of solely Asian American nonprofits, and even within those Asian American nonprofits, they often become mainly East Asian, and then like South Asian, Southeast Asian folks often have to start separate nonprofits. And there's also youth organizations and nonprofits that are predominantly Black and brown, like solely for Black folks, solely for yellow folks, like etc. And so like I realized that even if personally, even if these Asian nonprofits that I worked for would march for BLM, there was no real solidarity work happening at the end of the day beyond these very vague and temporary idealistic rhetoric. And so me and my friends founded Stand because we thought BIPOC solidarity was always a temporary afterthought. Temporary because if solidarity existed, it was never consistent, and an afterthought because solidarity was rarely ever the main mission of any organization. So we founded this organization because we wanted to provide this very consistent space for panracial solidarity.
Yeah, the keyword is consistent, because a lot of youth activism is reactionary, which means we usually mobilize after like one or two events and then it all dies down. And we wanted to have a space for consistent solidarity that existed beyond just like a singular movement. And activism can be really draining. And when we address heavy issues that impact our own communities and our families, it's inevitable that our energy is going to be drained and we're going to be subject to burnout. And we just wanted to remind BIPOC youth in specific that there's joy in being BIPOC, and that there exist communities that will make us feel safe and heard and supported, and communities that are gonna give us energy when we have none and support us and help us to recharge. BIPOC struggles and the institution of voting have always been intertwined, and the government was created for and by the white man, and it still pretty much functions as so. So our government still consists of rich, cishet, able-bodied white men who use the government as means of oppression that disproportionately oppress BIPOC communities. So yeah, in order to dismantle white supremacy, we need to get power to the people.
Amazing. Now let's continue with Emma from Sunrise LA Youth.
First off, I just want to say hearing all of these stories from everyone is so inspiring. This is killer. But the way I came to the climate movement in general with climate activism was actually really different than a lot of people involved in the movement. Going into it, I didn't care at all about, the environment or what was happening with coral reefs or the forests. I mean, I had like a certain level of understanding and care towards it, but ultimately what brought me to the climate movement in Sunrise specifically was the intersectionality of the movement, that it was, fighting for justice for Indigenous communities and Black communities that are disproportionately impacted by the climate crisis. And that's initially what got me through the door. But when I got in, I started realizing kind of how I could apply what I learned in my AP Environmental Science class to what was actually going on, in our nation as far as perpetuating the climate crisis. And I got involved with, in February, just before quarantine, I got involved with a small cohort of students at my school who were gearing up to recruit students at our school to march for Earth Day. And of course, those plans were derailed because of quarantine, but because Sunrise provided so many resources for me, I was able to get further involved, got involved with my local hub in LA. And then I met a bunch of students, high schoolers, who really wanted to start a new hub so that youth voices could be amplified, and kind of were spearheading the movement especially. And so I interviewed for the chapter director position, and I got the position. And I mean, it's been a crazy experience ever since. I would say everything is really rapid response to so much that's going on right now. And I think that especially with the resurgence of this new civil rights movement with Black Lives Matter, I think there's a lot more urgency and a dire nature of what we're doing now, because Black communities are so disproportionately affected by the climate crisis. So we really find ourselves in a position where we need to do justice to the communities within LA and really represent Los Angeles properly. So that's kind of been our main focus ever since, the birth of Sunrise LA Youth. And climate justice right now is super important that we tackle, because it's a culmination of many different issues: racial justice, socioeconomic justice, climate justice, of course. There's all these different issues that are combined to make what climate justice is. And we see that in different pieces of legislation written to combat the climate crisis, that in order to approach this situation, we need to approach all of the other systemic and institutionalized issues we have in our nation. Because if we leave certain groups behind, we're not achieving real and true climate justice. So right now, it's more important than ever that we're kind of fighting for it. And joining the climate movement made me realize that myself and normal individuals like us, just people living in America, aren't necessarily the ones causing the climate crisis. And making holistic choices is a great decision if you're in the capacity to, but the reality is not a lot of people are in the capacity to transition to a vegan diet and to shop secondhand, because it is getting so expensive right now. And to be able to just make these really sustainable decisions. Ultimately, what the issue is corporations and fossil fuel billionaires that are really perpetuating the climate crisis. And by and large, they're connected to our politicians, connected to our federal government, and that's ultimately what's continuing it, which is why voting is so important right now and why legislation and politics is so important to combating the climate crisis. And Sunrise really puts emphasis towards that and is really a policy-based group and a policy-based movement, because we're never going to be able to see real, true, deep-rooted foundational change without the work of policy and legislation. And I think we're in a really unique position right now because us young folks are really the ones mobilizing this movement, because we're seeing that our generation is deteriorating and we're the ones going to have to deal with this mess. So we're kind of taking on this issue. But it's also important to recognize that local politics plays such an important and vital role in what happens right under your nose. And it's unfortunate because unfortunately we don't know that our mayors and our city council members are the ones perpetuating systemic racism in our cities. And so I urge, those of you that are 18 years old or older and have the ability and capacity to vote, to really vote not only for federal level elections, but also local elections and those around you, because those are ultimately the ones that are going to impact you directly. And to really use your voice, whether you're in a position of privilege or not, tell your story, really just amplify your voices, because we need to hear from real people experiencing the climate crisis and just different issues now more than ever. We need to be the ones really spearheading this movement, guiding the movement, because we're the ones experiencing this right now. So I think, make sure that you're registering to vote if you can and if you're of age. And if not, make sure you're pushing people to do so if they're in the capacity to, and just mobilize, fight for what you really believe in, because we do have voice. And I think it's really important that we use that right now.
Thank you, Emma, for that amazing story. And we're going to go on now with Simran from the Ballot Project.
That was such an empowering thing to listen to. And now with my activism story, it kind of began in middle school, which by the way, I think middle school is just the worst time for everybody. But personally, I just found myself struggling with anxiety and stress, and in my journey sort of dealing with just this normal pressure of suddenly being a teenager, I was told to not keep my feelings bottled up. And that's how the Ballot Project was born. So the Ballot Project is a youth-led mental health initiative that relies on the idea that there's this bottle inside everybody that sort of holds their emotions. And through that imagery, we try to encourage people to empty their bottles or express themselves through conversation with like-minded individuals at webinars like this one, or just through things like art and things that make them happy. And personally, I think mental health is sort of stigmatized because it's not as easy to see as a broken leg or a fever. And I think the Ballot Project is a way of visualizing mental health and creating this image that makes mental health a more comfortable or common topic of conversation. And since we started, we've tried to do just that by engaging in over 9 campaigns with 8 nonprofit partners to bring the project to 5 different countries. So like I said earlier, I was born in DC, but I moved to Toronto at a very young age. And I've sort of grown up seeing like this disparity between Canada and the States, especially when it comes to healthcare and mental health. And what I've learned, the biggest thing I've learned is that voting is just so incredibly important because our lives are on the line. Especially as Anesa said, with activism, there comes so many different mental health concerns in fighting for these grand movements and grand articles of change. We need to take care of ourselves, because if we're going to be engaging in this battle, we have to start at home. And mental health intersects with our government in so many different ways. Our Medicare should cover therapy, mental health treatment, and we should talk about it in schools and make it an integral part of our curriculum. And when it comes to the youth vote, that's so incredibly important because 75% of serious mental illnesses occur before you turn 24. And we need to take the reins of this conversation because it affects us the most. And I'm really excited to have everyone here doing just that and participating in this panel and talking about these very serious issues because, you know, they come from home and they come from within. So thank you.
Amazing. That was like a wonderful story. So sorry. Last but not least, we're going to end off this event or end off the speaking portion of this event with Stella from Sam's chat.
All right, hello everyone. I'm gonna ask you guys to do something just to turn on your camera for probably 3 seconds. I just want to get a show of hands. How many of you do you feel are actively working on your mental health? Just like by a show of hands, right? So a few, but like not all of us. And I think this is important too for Simran from the Ballot Project. What an amazing cause. My name is Stella Rose, and today I come to you on behalf of Sam's Chat. We are also an online mental health resource created for and by the people of Gen Z. Now, as members of Gen Z, I think we can all agree that our title as the progressive generation is fitting. You know, we're a group of people who genuinely care about the world around us, but the struggle still stands. How can we be expected to change the world when we can't vote? When we're constantly feeling anxious about the state of the world, when we are giving into the stigma surrounding mental health? I saw these issues. My co-founder, Maddie Stein, felt the impact of these issues, and our third co-founder, Eliza Novoa, united us to tackle these issues. Together, we decided that Gen Z should take the power back, and thus Sam's Chat emerged. We started as a weekly Zoom meeting with teenagers from across California, and soon blossomed into a nonprofit organization which provides an outlet for teens across the country to discuss current issues and their effects on our mental health. We felt like there wasn't a safe space for teenagers to discuss their own opinions and emotions surrounding certain matters. In a world dominated by adult voices, we felt silenced and unable to speak confidently about the issues we faced, solely because there wasn't a space to do so. Now, after some failed Google searches trying to find such a space, we decided to create our own program. Every week, we host a 2-hour Zoom call open to all teenagers, where we focus on one prominent issue we face. The power of these Zoom calls is that it is all youth voices. Rather than an adult lecturing about a topic, us teens feel empowered to make our own opinions and voices known. We've talked about everything, ranging from sexism and racial injustices to gender identity and family dynamics, all things that can have a deep impact on our lives. But with the support group of over 80 individuals and weekly meetings that include resources on how to tackle the issues we face, large multifaceted topics quickly turn into meaningful and productive conversations. As our emphasis on mental health does not change, our conversations spark a call to action. We often feel that our voices are not being heard by our officials, but our chat is used to inspire lifestyle change and empowerment to tackle social injustices. Though we are not in legislative positions where we can formally mandate that overwhelming feelings caused by circumstance are valid, we can offer a sanctuary which empowers the youth body. At Sam's Chat, it is necessary that anyone who joins our chat understands that vulnerability is power. We believe and have seen that when one ascertains this understanding, that the next generation of voters are empowered and comfortable with embracing human emotions. As a collective youth body, we find it urgent that we change our culture and eradicate disparities that are products of a stigma surrounding mental health. And this change begins with a vote. Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you, Stella. That was a great story. And those are all the panelists. And thank you for your experiences and insight. And now we're going to open it up to a Q&A. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your blue hand or your actual hand so we can remain organized. And just like a side note, if you like when a panelist like answers a question or they say something you like, you can always react with a thumbs up or a clapping hands, or you can type in the chat, which I'm pretty sure we've been doing, but yeah. And I have a question to start this off. How do you manage to keep inspired and persistent during quarantine and overcome the new obstacles that come with staying at home?
Also, panelists, you can raise your hand if you want to answer the question. Sorry, we didn't clarify that. Emma, take it away.
Oh, thank you. This is such a great question, and I think it's really easy to feel super burnt out and lose hope in the fight. Honestly, I think that um, being able, especially when we first started quarantine, being able to put my attention towards activism efforts and things that I cared about, as opposed to the burden of having to attend school and be there constantly and have this really stringent schedule, actually opened up my ability to get involved with activism. Ultimately, it's really difficult because we can't take it to the streets as much as we used to be able to. But there are so many virtual ways that we can get involved, whether it be doing webinars or panels like this, educating people, doing phone banks and text banks for different campaigns to really get involved with legislation and politics. Those are just some really key tools into making the most of virtual activism in this space. And I think that we also kind of, depending on where we're at, we need to understand the privilege that we harbor depending on, you know, what situation we're in. Like, for example, with me, I am a middle-class individual, and, you know, while I'm Middle Eastern, I don't experience systemic racism as Black individuals or Latin individuals do in this country. So ultimately, it's up to me to continue fighting this fight because I have the capacity to do so, and to amplify the voices of those that aren't able to take it to the streets as much as they might be able to, or don't have internet access and do that. So ultimately, understanding that and taking that into account and really understanding kind of the dire nature of all of this is really what keeps me going, and I guess keeps me motivated to, you know, continue this fight for sure.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Emma. Stella.
Yeah, Emma, that was great. And especially just like understanding the dire nature of the world around us is, I mean, it fills us with anxiety, and I think we can all feel that. And with that too, how do we address the world and also how we're feeling at the same time? And I think that's inspiration for Sam's chat as well, is that we should be addressing the social injustices. It's healthy to have that discourse, but also we need to prioritize how we're feeling and how it's making us feel. Not only so we can be compassionate, but so, you know, we can express those feelings to kind of let out those emotions and have those conversations. And while also talking about social injustices, eradicating a stigma around mental health, which I don't know why it's there, but, you know, we're working to get rid of it as well. So I think, you know, especially as activists in quarantine, it's hard because we can't see each other and we're losing the power of touch and the power of going to the streets. But here we are in a panel talking about all of these great issues that are facing us, and what an amazing day for all of us to be here together.
Thank you, Stella. Simran, but also, if anyone has any questions to ask the panelists, once again, you can click the raise hand function in the chat and then we'll call on you. But Simran, go ahead.
Stella, I think that was amazing, and I agree with that so much, because this is a long fight. Activism is going to take us it's a long process and a long journey, and we need to make sure that we're there for ourselves as well. And during this pandemic, I think social media sort of propagated this false idea of, you know, you have to be productive because you're at home now and you have all this time. But the thing is, we're not just working or studying from home, we're working and studying from home during a global pandemic, during a global crisis. And we need to understand that we need to firstly be gentle with ourselves. And if there are days where it's hard to get up and out of bed, that's okay. And we just need to create this healthy relationship with ourselves and a healthy relationship with activism so that we can keep going, because this is not going to be over tomorrow. So yeah.
Thank you. Bryce, and then Esha, sorry, don't want to mispronounce your name. Your question next, Bryce.
So it's just so amazing to hear that so many of you started your organizations, like specifically this year or earlier in the summer, because I realized with everything happening this year, like a lot of teens just started movements, whether it's like personal or at their school. So I want to know, how did you guys turn your like want to make a change from an idea into like, from an idea into like a whole movement? like an organization and all that stuff?
So I can start. Grayson and I, at least, we were actually working with this other organization on their social media team. It was just in general kind of about just youth vote, like increasing the youth vote. But we just noticed a lot of stuff that we wanted to dive more into the educational side of it. And we wanted to be doing a bit more than social media. So then we kind of like branched out and just created our own thing that focused more on the educational side. Because since the other organization was youth-led, we were kind of inspired by that concept, and it just felt more approachable. And I think something that's unique is like, as Gen Z, since we grew up in this digital age, there's so much that's so accessible to us. And I think as this generation is kind of getting a lot older, where this is something that we're seeing as more common, whether it's just like people creating an Instagram account that then gets like hundreds of thousands of followers. I think it's just something that growing up in the digital age, you have so much that's more accessible to you. So I think it was just something that became feasible for us, at least. But it's, I think it's just something that, I guess it just became more feasible.
Thank you, Devin. Does anyone else have anything, any of the other panelists have anything to add? Okay. Oh wait, oh yes, Joanne.
Yeah, so for Joey and I, it was a lot of like it's really true that an idea can bring you really far. It was really just like one night when Joey and I were texting, and we were saying how like, because we've noticed all of those posts on Instagram and we see them all the time, and something that really woke us up was the fact that so many people just like swipe past, or like like they just like look at it, maybe comment even, but other than that, no action is really taken, and it's so normalized, right? And we realized that like honestly, like we were guilty of doing that sometimes as well, and to like really combat that, it started just like the two of us, and then we asked some friends to join as well, and then eventually it like spread to like a lot of different people who like from all across the country.
Amazing, thank you. Esha, sorry if I mispronounced your name. Do you have a question?
No, it's okay. It's pronounced Aisha.
Aisha, sorry.
That's okay. So I have a question. It's really for anybody. What are you guys reading, or like what would your reading recommendations be? I'm thinking like, Emma, I caught your presentation about environmental justice, and I'm just like wondering who are I guess like the activists, the people before you that you kind of look up to that guide and shape the work you're doing.
Amazing question. Emma?
That is such a great question. And this totally isn't a plug. Like Millie's right. I was absolutely ready, and it's actually right next to me. So our executive director of Sunrise, I kid you not, this was not planned, everyone. So our executive director of Sunrise actually wrote a book. It's right here. It's called Winning the Green New Deal, Why We Must, How We Can. And I really recommend it. It's really inspiring. It really goes deeply into legislation and politics, and how these foundational systemic issues are essentially what is perpetuating the climate crisis. Because oftentimes I feel like we're often given misconstrued information that it's our fault that the climate is the way it is, when ultimately it's not our fault. It's about like 10 people in America's fault that the climate crisis is the way it is. And I really recommend this book. I also recommend books by, the new Jim Crow, Millie just dropped in the chat. It's great about mass incarceration. Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson is amazing to understand the law process and the prison industrial complex. Really look up Black authors specifically, because I've been so inspired by their works specifically right now, especially about environmental and socioeconomic issues. So I really just recommend being on the radar for that. That was a great question.
Amazing response, Emma. Wow. Does any of the other panelists have any other book recommendations? We could start a little activism book club. Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions for the panelists? Again, you can just raise your hand. Any, really feel free. Okay. I'm gonna ask a question. Maybe it'll spark and somebody else's interest. So just like a quick little question. This is for all of the panelists. How do I get involved in your organization? Like, all of your organizations are amazing. So how do I actually get involved and help make a difference? We can start off with JJ Eco Friends. We're just gonna go in order.
Joe, you want me to answer or like you can answer? Oh, well, for us,
Yeah,
so
you can go.
okay. We do have a join the team form that we can share later on, but basically for us, we're really open to having new people join the team because you know, obviously everyone should have the opportunity and ability to use their own talents to do like whatever we can, right? So at JJ Eco Friends, we really are a big like supporter of like, you know, being really unique with what you do and having it fit and be personalized for what you can provide. So if anyone's interested, yeah, we'll drop the link in the chat.
Amazing. Grayson, Devin,
So if you want to get involved in Beyond the Ballot, there's a form on our website. I can put that in the chat, or you can DM us on Instagram, and I can also put our Instagram in the chat.
amazing. Who else? Sid?
Yeah, so if you want to get involved with Earth Guardians LA Valley, we have an Instagram at Earth Guardians LA Valley. I can put that in the chat in case you need it. But yeah, and you can become a member, you can donate, and even just spread the word about the issue, because it's not about being part of the organization, it's about what the organization is trying to do. So anything you can do to like help be an activist is always helpful.
Amazing. Also, agree with Millie. I want to join all of your organization. Please let me in. Next, Stan New York.
You guys can follow us on Instagram at Stan New York to keep up to date with our posts and any events that we're hosting. We also have a member application for any BIPOC youth that wants to join. We will link that in the chat.
Amazing. The Bottle Project.
So if you want to get involved, you can find us on Instagram, and I'll drop the @ in the chat. You can keep up to date on all of the campaigns and events we're hosting. We're actually having a webinar in the next few weeks where you can ask a bunch of mental health professionals any questions you have about mental health. So I really hope that you guys come up to that.
Sounds amazing. I will be there. Okay, last but not least, Sam's chat. Before that, did I miss anyone else? I think Sam's chat's left. Oh, Emma and then Sam's chat. Emma, so sorry.
No problem, you're good. To get involved with Sunrise LA Youth specifically, I will drop our website in the chat. Obviously, you have to live in Los Angeles to get involved, but I will also drop the Sunrise Movement's link in the chat as well, because there are chapters all over the US, and you can really easily get involved anywhere you live. And I'm sure there's, you know, a chapter near you, or you could start one. You know, you need only 3 people to start a chapter. So I will drop those links in the chat really quickly.
Amazing. Okay, now this is actually last but not least, Sam's chat. Stella.
Okay, hi everyone. At Sam's chat, all we ask if you are interested in joining is just filling out our Google Doc, and I think we're gonna also put that in the chat. You just click on the link. It's a simple application. It's basically your name, age, where you're from, all that fun stuff. And then we also have a disclaimer, and that is literally just a legal thing. So that way, you know, if you are, you know, talking to us about something serious, that you guys know we're not mandated reporters, that we're not mental health professionals. We're simply teenagers who are, you know, willing to listen to other teenagers. We hold Zooms every Sunday at 12 p.m. Pacific time. So depending on where you live, it might change, but you are welcome to come. We have people from California, from North Carolina, So we are really looking for more people from different geographic places. The link is in the chat, and yeah.
Amazing. I am gonna do a quick little self promo for Future Voters LA. I know that's maybe why Millie was raising her hand, but I'll still call it. Okay, she wasn't raising her hand for that reason. Oopsies. But I am gonna drop the link. So if you're interested in joining our organization, feel free to forms down below. Okay, now let's get back to this was great, but let's get back to any more questions. Millie.
Right. I have a question for all the panelists. So how do we kind of deal with the political apathy that I feel like is a big part of our generation? Maybe I'm not really sure why, but do you guys have any guesses for why and how we can kind of change that or get people more aware and involved?
I think a large portion of the political apathy is actually involved with the presidential election that's going on right now. Obviously, this is a nonpartisan event, but I do think a lot of with this new understanding of what progressive really means, I think that a lot of people are finding they don't see how they would define progressive represented in any candidate right now or major party candidate. So I think in a certain way we have to think of the elections as not just an every 4-year thing. It's a constant thing, and we can make so much more changes along the way to then get to a point where in one of those every 4-year, the presidential elections, we are seeing someone that we think really embodies our beliefs and our values, whatever those may be. I think that it's really important that we see this as a constant type of thing. But I do agree that there is a disconnect that is a little bit confusing between the actual political apathy versus it's very clear we care about so many social issues that then feed into political issues. So I think it's that's kind of a bit of what Grace and I are trying to make a connection between kind of how these feed into one another on smaller levels.
And also, I think it's really important to remember, Devin, you just said that elections aren't just an every 4-year thing, but especially this year, we've really gotten caught up in the presidential election, but there is really so much work that can be done on your local level that in a lot of respects is even more important. And I think that really starting to educate yourself and understanding how your local government works and your state government will kind of allow you to engage politically, because it's really hard to care about the government when you don't even know what you're supposed to care about. So really starting with that foundational level of understanding the government you live under is a really important step for us.
Amazing. Thank you. Emma.
Yeah, so something that I've learned kind of about the climate crisis and climate issues in general is they seem really far off, especially to, the average teen who kind of lives in a suburban, middle class neighborhood with 2 working parents, living kind of just an average Joe life, a comfortable life, which, props to you if you do. That's really awesome. Really comfortable life, but ultimately people want to know how these issues impact them and kind of what's in it for them, right? So for me, I kind of didn't think of the climate crisis as something that impacted me, but I've experienced 5 wildfires in my entire 17 years of living just in my neighborhood alone. And that's not something new. And it's because of the climate crisis. And someone just dropped in the chat and said, politics is not just Republican and Democrats. Yeah, it's about human rights, and things like climate crisis should not be a partisan issue. Essentially, it's about science and facts and what's in front of us, and that it's disproportionately affecting different people. So I think ultimately we just need to keep putting up a fight and really try to level with people who don't understand these issues and how it impacts them, and really help them understand kind of what's at stake here, because oftentimes it's not necessarily hatred or being against something. It's kind of a lack of information or just being oblivious or ignorant about an issue. And I think really once we start speaking one-on-one with each other and kind of understanding how things impact us, that's where we really can start to build a wider movement.
Amazing, thank you. I mean, I know, for example, I live in Los Angeles and my school, like we literally prepare for like 2 weeks in October that we just can't go to school because the smoke is so bad. And like, that's the case that we have to live in, which is really upsetting. Simran.
I think the wildfires are crazy, and I hope you guys are doing well and are safe. Just when it comes to political apathy, I think that Gen Z is just so driven by empathy, and I think that's one of the greatest things about our generations. We care so much about other people, and I think when it comes to voting, we need to realize what a privilege it is. And if you don't want to vote for yourself, vote for other people. Vote for the children who aren't old enough. Vote for the people who can't come out to the ballots. Vote for the undocumented folks, the people who are in prisons without the right to vote. And I think just realizing just that this vote, it's something so simple, but it's so large and so much bigger than all of us individually. And I think we need to really understand how the smallest action impacts the people next to us. And I think just taking that step to understand that, I think that would really make a big difference in the voter turnout. Because I think we have the empathy within us. I think it's just a matter of acting on it now.
Thank you. All of these responses have been amazing so far. Camille, the question?
Hi. I just want to say what you guys are doing is so cool, and I'm so happy that Stella sent me the link to join this. I love hearing your guys' thoughts and everything that you're doing. One question I have is, like so many previous speakers mentioned, activism can be so exhausting. So how do you guys separate yourself or take a step back from it all, because it can feel so crushing at some points?
Thank you. That was an amazing question. Does any of our okay, Francis.
Yeah, so I think this is in half of our like mission is creating these like these BIPOC communities of support and recharge to address things like activism burnout, and the fact that like inevitably activism, especially for BIPOC youth, is combating racism within our own communities and like the impacts of institutional oppression within our families and like in our communities. And so of course like it sucks, like it has like emotional impact on us as like people, and especially if we have to like deal with it a lot, because we're going out of our, like we're doing extra work like beyond the experience, like racist experiences inflicted on us. We're doing extra work to like combat racism within our communities. It has a very detrimental like emotional impact, but I think part of what Stand is doing is like creating these BIPOC communities of support and saying that like being a person of color doesn't have to be like a terrible, like doesn't have to suck. Like there are like joys in being a person of color, and we can find these like communities that will support each other. And so like when I get tired and like feel burnt out from all like work and stuff, I think like Anesa, me Anesa and like all the other overseers at Stand, like we just call for fun, and like sometimes like we just won't do any work on call, and we'll just like talk and play like, among us and like chill. And it's like I think it's important to have these like spaces of just relaxing and like getting to know your community, so being part of your community gives you energy rather than draining you.
Thank you. Stella?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Francis was saying. I really admire what Stand is doing in like creating those communities. And I really see a lot of that mission in Sam's chat as well. We created a community that I think no one knew was there, that we kind of didn't really understand. Yeah, Bianca, we didn't really know that people, care to talk about mental health, and that we're kind of from everywhere with a bunch of different backgrounds. And we all have one thing in common, and that is, caring about mental health and helping our friends. And something that I think is really important, especially as an activist or an aspiring activist, is to ensure that you do have that community. And I like what Francis said, get to know them. And if that's, talking and playing games, or at Sam's chat, sometimes we'll talk about, anxiety and what makes you feel anxious and what are some things that you can do that can relieve that anxiety. And often our conversations will diverge and we'll talk about our favorite candles from Rite Aid, so it really is establishing and joining those safe places where you can have those conversations that kind of take you out of reality, which tends to be stressful, especially if you're a senior. because I'm a senior right now. It's so stressful. But all of these organizations are here for you, and I'm sure anyone who runs them would be more than happy to offer you a space where you can find that sanctuary.
Yes, amazing. Well, it just really warms my heart to hear all of these like amazing speakers, and I'm not gonna cry. We gotta continue to move on, but wow, you all are amazing. Emma.
Yeah, so totally agree with you, Bianca. I mean, everyone here is just so amazing. I think Stella can kind of attest to this idea that a lot of times we often feel like we don't deserve a break. And if we're not productive every single day, that like we failed, or that we don't deserve to like sleep that night, or we don't deserve to kind of like be fulfilled by just like a day that passed by because we didn't do X, Y, and Z, or we didn't finish everything on our task list. And I think the first step, especially as an activist, is to understand and realize that you do deserve those breaks. And it doesn't have to be like, I'm gonna take one day off and then I'm back on the grind. No, you can take a week, 2, as long as you need, because ultimately you are not going to be a successful activist if you don't take breaks and you don't rest. And because we don't want this to be a fight filled with frustration from ourselves. We want to, ultimately have a fight filled with hope and kind of mobilize around that. So I honestly just recommend first like telling yourself that you deserve a break. And if you can unplug a little bit from social media every now and then, that really helps too, because it's one thing to have a million different things going on in your personal life, but then to be bombarded by the million different things going on in everyone else's lives and in the world is a lot. It's a lot. So definitely unplugging for a quick sec is definitely helpful, and I definitely recommend it.
Thank you. Sid?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Anna said. That was a wonderful response. And I also think that it can be really hard, of course, but I think in general, just looking at the big picture and remembering what you're fighting for, and also using the like looking to your friends and people around you for support, and remember that you're also not fighting alone. You're not the only one fighting this fight. I can guarantee you there's someone out there who cares about the same issues, and so you're not alone. So not all the responsibility is on you. You have other people out there, and just like have compassion for yourself, and remember that most most likely you've probably already accomplished a lot. So also be proud of what you have accomplished already, and know that you have people there to support you and help you go even further.
Thank you. That was amazing. I honestly think I also need to hear that, because I know it's very like there's a lot of pressure that you have to kind of do everything and be that like, superstar activist. But sometimes like the best you can do for your community is just like, take a break and be present. So are there any other questions for these amazing speakers? Anyone has any questions? Any questions? Okay, so seeing that,
I think Angela had a question.
Angela?
Hi.
Okay, yes. Hi, Angela.
My question is, when like doing your own research, researching on like an issue or problem that you are really curious about, I usually get like really overwhelmed with all the resources that are out there. So where do you start?
Great question. And Devin, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so I dealt with a lot of this because Grayson and I were really lucky to have a pretty extensive research team, but a lot of the time, a lot of people did end up saying like, this is way too much, and they couldn't take like all the workload that they had signed up for, which is totally understandable. So I ended up doing a large portion of it, and going through like all this state research, kind of trying to compile all this was just the most just incredibly exhausting. And kind of just how we were just talking about, I found that I had to take like 2 weeks to not do anything to recover from like my 8 hours a day of all this research. But I find that sometimes you just have to like get into it. But I also think that oftentimes like just taking breaks, kind of honestly doing all the things that everyone just spoke about when you're doing just activism in general, because I think at the same time just doing a bunch of research and making sure that you're informed is something that can be just as exhausting as actually going out and like protesting, doing whatever in real life. And just trying, because there's so much going on, and at a certain point you just have to take a break because it's overload, especially in terms of the news. I know as someone who has the news on in their house literally all the time, I know it can drive you insane. And so you just have to, like, just as you would with regular activism, you just have to be like checking in with yourself and making sure that you're not overloading, because if you're doing all this research but it's not like you're not like absorbing it because of how much you're doing, then it's not really worth your time. So I definitely think just like monitoring it like you would anything else.
Grayson?
Yeah, also just I think it's really important to remember that like your education, your like personal growth it's not going to come overnight, and you have to take baby steps with it, and don't feel overwhelmed if you're not understanding it, and like it's going to take time. You're not going to become an expert on a topic overnight. And for me, like accepting that was kind of like a big step for me in terms of like getting more engaged in activism in general, because when I first started, I kind of felt like I'm already too far behind to like get my foot in the door. But it really takes like time and effort, and if it's something that like you're truly interested in and you're passionate in, then it will come with time.
Thank you. Stella?
Yeah, just really quick, because at Sam's Chat, we post resources every time after we have a chat. So if we have a chat about gender identity, we'll post resources, hotlines, websites, songs, movies, like everything. And it's overwhelming. We sit there for like an hour after we prepare the script, and we go through all of these websites. And that can be a big task to take on, like the previous speakers have said. To help you out to narrow that down, I would definitely recommend hitting up any one of these resources, because we have done the work for you. If you're interested in a certain topic, if you're interested in mental health, you can come to Sam's Chat or the Bottle Project. If you want to know more about the climate crisis, you can go to the Sunrise Movement, LA, or wherever you're from. So just make that easier on yourself and really take advantage of the people who have made this their livelihood, because they most likely have accurate answers for you with a lot less work involved.
Yes. Emma?
Yeah, so I love what everyone was saying about like taking baby steps, not feeling the pressure of understanding everything right away. And that's super important to understand, that you don't need to be an expert on everything to be able to still be passionate about something or have a say in what you're talking about. I definitely think that, especially when it comes to climate, there's a lot of facts and figures and statistics, and those are kind of nothing without one, contextualization, and two, understanding that how that affects us. Personally, I've gained way more understanding of the climate crisis in general by talking to people and learning about their experiences. Because, for example, if someone lives near an oil rig or a pipeline, at surface level, I'm not going to understand why that's an issue or how that'll impact them. But when I'm talking to an Indigenous person saying that their entire community was displaced, or their land was stripped from them, or they're developing asthma or bronchitis or breathing issues because of that, it not only gives me an idea of how that manifests itself in the world, but how it's impacting other people. And it gives me more like a fervent passion to fight for it, because ultimately what we're doing, all of us, is fighting for people. And I think as if we can connect these things to people as much as possible, that's really what's going to give us the most understanding of these issues. And it's definitely hard to reach every community, but I think if you get involved in activism, oftentimes the Sunrise Movement, or I'm sure Sam's Chat or Beyond the Ballot, they all work with different organizations where you can then network and meet with other people, or even just read the, like resource guides that different activism organizations make about racial issues or climate issues. So that would definitely be my advice.
Also, going off of what Emma said, one thing that kind of surprised Devin and I when we first started like reaching out to other youth-led organizations is how excited they are to work with us. And I know we worked with you guys, Future Voters, and we've collaborated with a couple other organizations, and don't like feel intimidated, or just like know that there are other people out there that really want to engage with you and talk with you. So don't feel like you're taking a big leap by reaching out, because everyone wants to help out.
Thank you. Francis?
Yeah, so I think a good place to start is I think with like the accessibility of social media, you can, and like I have some qualms with social media activism because I think some of it like promotes like some iffy ideas. But one account that I really like is Project Unsettlement. That if y'all should just check them out. They're like post essays instead of just like regular infographics, and like because of that, you get a more critical, in-depth approach of like these very complex topics that I think was like very helpful for me to just start out like where my ideas are. And then obviously Instagram should not be where it starts and ends. Like you should take a little bit more action after that. And me personally, I find like I've started a lot of books over quarantine and I've had a really hard time finishing them. Like I'll read 10 chapters and I'm like, I can't, like I have 4 books like that I'm like a third through, but I haven't committed to fully reading, which is difficult for me. And so like what I find is easier is reading articles. And so like those are like 20 pages, maybe longer, but committing to like 2 days reading some articles written by some like theorists or like academics or anything that you can find for free online is like very helpful, and like it's very like low commitment, and they are, a lot of them are free online. Some of them you do have to, there are obviously a lot that you have to pay for databases, but there are a lot of resources you can find online. And kind of like a plug, but Stan is also releasing this resource toolkit that we're partnering with Black Students Demanding for Change. And so we're basically outlining organizations that you can take action, you can like collaborate with to take action from, like nonprofits that you can intern at and like volunteer with, but also like resources for you. So like mental health services for you, like free therapy that for you, because we also think that it is both, yeah, like we need to take action and collaborate with others, but also that you need to have, like a lot of these organizations have like free resources that are meant for you, and that you should take advantage of them.
Thank you. Sid?
Yeah, a resource that I always find really helpful, especially because I have ADHD and I find it really hard to focus on reading a lot in a short amount of time. So I listen to news podcasts that I find while I'm doing, while I'm eating or brushing my teeth. And that's really helpful because you can take in that information and you don't have to sit for a long period of time and read. And also, going back to what Emma said about activism being people-centered, find people that are already like involved in the issues that you care about, and do research on like what they've done, and that will give you like an I find it really helpful to actually reach out to those people. When I first started, I want to be a marine biologist when I'm in college, so that's what I want to major in. So I did some research. I found someone who had the exact job I knew that I wanted. I emailed her and I was like, "How did you do it?" And I learned so much from just that. So if you like, just don't be afraid to reach out. Like people are always like exactly what Grayson said, people are always gonna want to talk to you and help you.
Thank you. So Millie's gonna be our last question. I'm sorry for cutting it short, but I just don't want, like all these questions have been amazing so far. I'm just gonna say, if I'm gonna let Millie go, but does anyone else have questions? And then I'll see. I just don't want to cut any people off. Okay. Looking, raise your hand. Okay, I'm gonna let Millie go, and then I think we'll conclude from there.
Okay, just really quick. I am not a panelist, but I did want to say, amazing job to all the panelists. You guys are so wonderful. I mean, I came in here kind of like nervous and worried, like, well, what are we going to cover? What is this whole thing going to be about? And every person just like totally, like each new perspective just made me totally like, just left me in awe. It was great. Thanks guys so much. And then second off, I wanted to say like to Angela's question about like, how do I get started? Or like, where do I even start? I feel like activism is so scary. Even like personally to me too. When I look at it, it's just so huge and I don't know where I belong or where I can kind of fit in. And I think that's what like all our organizations or all our initiatives have started. We've kind of like taken this huge broad concept and we've taken our individual steps into forming these groups and going forward. Especially because we're all youth, I feel like it's easier for us to like relate to each other or be able to at least talk to each other, or have a better, like a more understanding conversation. So having these youth-led organizations is just like totally changing the way that I view activism, because I see that I can do it too and I can get involved. So like, just like a call to action for everybody, like just get involved. Look at all these amazing organizations. Like I don't see a reason why we shouldn't, because we have all these opportunities right in front of us and we've heard from them today. And I don't want this to be the last time that I ever hear from you guys or go forward to make change. So I'm definitely going to do that, and you guys should join me in doing that. That's it.
Thank you, Millie. 1 second. Okay. So thank you for all of the speakers. Millie, can you respond to my chat really quickly? No? Okay. Can you just look at my chat really quickly?
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. One more question. So before this is kind of gonna close everything. I just wanted to ask, why is voting an intersectional issue? I think that every single organization here, yes, some of them involve voting, but they're all so different and they all have so many different things to offer. So why should we register to vote? This week is National Voter Registration Week. Why should we register to vote? And why should we show up to the polls on November 3rd? Or if you're not 18, why should we actually pre-register? Okay. Emma, sorry.
Yeah, so voting is a super intersectional issue, but it's also a really sacred, I guess, right to have, since it is constantly being taken away from different people, especially if people aren't documented immigrants, or if they are incarcerated, they don't have that right necessarily, or if they live in US territories, they also don't have that right. So it's something that's really important, that if you have the privilege to be able to vote, you know, it's imperative that you actually do so. And ultimately, when it comes to all of these issues that we have, whether it be mental health and climate and just everything of that nature, racial issues, they're all deep rooted in systemic and institutionalized systems that we have in this country. And ultimately, the only change we can see is through politics. And even though on a federal level, it may seem like extremely far off or something that we can't penetrate and we can't take action towards. Locally, there's so much that you can really do when it comes to voting for your mayor or your city council members that we don't even realize. Like, for example, all the funds that essentially are allocated to different systems in your cities are essentially decided by your mayor. So if you are, you know, really pro mental health resources for everyone where you live, get involved with local politics. Make sure you're voting in people that will kind of see that through, and that, you know, reaches every single issue that we've discussed here for sure.
Thank you. Joanne?
Yeah, so to piggyback off of what Emma was saying, like, I honestly think that a lot of times people, like, the reason why they don't really get into activism, or they just kind of think that, you know, like, all hope is lost, because they're like, oh, even if I change, you know, it doesn't mean I can change like the whole world, right? And I think that's something a lot of people like think, and like a lot of like that's a lot of people's thought process. But if you think about it, like, through voting, like, whenever these people like higher up in politics make these decisions, you know, it's a really great way to actually like get change going and really have more people as a community, you know, make change. And I think it's actually some like a realization that I came to like not long ago. I was like, you know what, that's actually like so true, right? Because it's literally like this group of people that are representing all of us, right? So yeah.
Thank you. Do any of the other panelists want to touch on this before we? Yes. Devin?
Yeah, I think voting is the intersectional issue. This kind of continuing what Emma was getting at, but if you also think about how much voter suppression there is in the United States, just in terms of right now, if you think about the post office, if you're thinking about like post incarceration rights, I think that it's just so critical that we not only vote for ourselves, but we're voting for others, and we're keeping others in mind that cannot vote, because then even like if you're not keeping them in mind, there are people, it's like this huge kind of feedback loop that all just like, it's more of a cycle, that it's like you can vote people in power that can then give more people the right to vote. So it's kind of just like this concept. There's so many people that they actively make such an effort to not let them get into the ballot, not let them get to the polls, whether it's just not even having like an ID, the smallest things, not knowing your social security number. There's a huge not being able to stand in line for 1 million hours because you're from a community that doesn't have enough poll workers. Also quickly right now, just so you guys know, if any of you are 18, it's really important that we get more poll workers, because most poll workers are above 50, and with coronavirus, so many of them cannot do that right now. So if you guys can, please look into that and try to do that. But anyway, it's just so important that we keep that in mind. Like, all the people that don't have the privilege to go vote are kind of the reason that voting is such an intersectional issue. And also, if you think about the people that now have the privilege to vote, just even thinking about like white women, that's kind of new too. And so it's just so important that we keep all of that in mind.
Thank you. Yes, perfect. Like, become a poll worker. I'm pretty sure also in some cases you do get paid for it. I know Emma's saying you get service hours for it. Like, it's an amazing opportunity. So definitely, I know the deadline's coming up soon, and some schools already had their deadline. So I think sometimes you have to get a work permit. So make sure you're doing that. Stella.
Yeah, just to round it out too, for anyone here who's not 18, you can pre-register. If you are 16 years old, you can pre-register to vote. And so that way you will be all ready and set to go in the first election you can vote in. And it's really easy too. There are so many resources on social media. I know the California website, but I know not everyone is from California. But it's a few steps. You do need to know your social security number. So if you're in a position to ask your parents or guardians for that, you put that in, your information, and then you can put it in a party, or you don't have to, and then you'll be set. So if you are not in a position to actually go vote in this election, just know that you can enable yourself to do so now.
Thank you. Sid will be our last speaker, and then we'll conclude the show. Sid?
For those of you that aren't even 16 yet, because I know I'm 15, so it can be really frustrating. So, but there's a lot that you can do, especially when it comes to encouraging other people to vote, because there are always going to be like adults in the life that you can encourage to go vote, and that's like a huge thing, because you don't have to be 16 or 18 to make an impact. Activism doesn't have an age limit.
Thank you. Joanna?
Yeah, okay. So I think that concludes this panel, and thank you for all your answers. I know I'll definitely be looking to get myself involved in all your organizations. And thank you for coming. We hope you learned something new or took something away from this panel. You can keep up with other amazing events we're planning for this high school voter registration week by checking our Instagram at futurevoters.la.
Also, if you're a panelist, please stay. We want to congrats. But thank you all for coming. This panel was amazing. And I'm honestly so happy to hear everyone, all the questions, all the voices. You all are amazing. Register to vote, go make a change. Check out all the amazing organizations that were featured. And yeah, you all make me so proud of our generation.
Thank you.